Good day. Pat Buchanan today on his book, Suicide of a Superpower, Will America Survive to 2025? I'm going to give you a television eternity, Pat.
Right.
Take 3 minutes and explain your thesis, or theses. You actually have more than one.
Right.
And what would you do about them?
Well, one of them is I don't think the United States is going to be the last and lone superpower by 2020. I think China is rising so fast it's going to be a military virtual equal of the United States and an economic equal, so we're going to a bipolar world. Secondly, I think the American state, the nation's state, the government is in deep trouble, Ralph. It cannot balance its budgets or secure its borders or win its wars or stop the hemorrhaging of its manufacturing base overseas. We lost 6 million manufacturing jobs in the first decade of the 21st century. Some 55,000 factories shut down. The United States is declining as a great superpower and a great nation. But I think the most important thing I see is that America is disintegrating. I think it was Lee Hamilton who said that the centrifugal forces are becoming dominant in American society. And I think if you look at our country, you will see that ethnically, in terms of class, in terms of philosophy and ideology, and in terms of race even, the United States seems to be breaking down into enclaves of people who separate from each other and do not much like each other and even detest each other. And so in that sense, America will be a legal entity, I think, and a political entity. But I don't think we'll be able to call ourselves one nation under God, indivisible. Again, I don't think we'll be a country in the sense that John Jay in Federalist II described us as one unique, separate people.
And yet, you know, this Occupy Wall Street effort that's
Right.
proliferating in hundreds of communities,
Right.
it's marked by a great diversity of background,
Right.
cultures, religions, race,
Right.
sort of united against the power of Wall Street and Washington.
Right.
In a desperate search for a more democratic society, not just political,
Right.
but economic. How do you explain that? That seems to be against the
Against what I'm saying?
force, yeah.
Well, I do think this. I think that the measure of unity that they have, I think one of the reasons they have it is because they're not defining their demands. I've seen some of their 13 demands, and I'm sure some of those folks who are Tea Party types would not be in favor of those demands. So I think there's no question about it, Ralph. I agree with the fundamental premise of the Occupy Wall Street folks, which is, look, these fellas up here played the highest stakes poker game in the world. They had a great time. They made billions of dollars. And then all of a sudden they were wiped out. And they ran to Uncle and said, give us back our chips. And Uncle gave them back his chips. Now they're playing again, and they got the bonuses. And everybody out in middle America is suffering. You got 9% unemployment and 16% probably active unemployed and those searching for work. And so I share the exasperation and the anger and the rage at that inequity and injustice. But again, when you come to an agenda, I think you will find they break down ideologically, and I think they will. And also, Ralph, I think as the winter comes, they're not going to, a lot of them are going to peel off. They're not going to get the publicity they did, Ralph. And what's going to happen, they're going to go and they're going to do things such as happened in Atlanta, happened in Oakland. And I think then the American people will turn them off because the American people, they don't like what happened in Grant Park when I was out there in 1968.
Or they'll move south in warmer weather.
But listen, let me mention something. You and I were at the Battle of Seattle, all right?
Yeah.
We had a good group there. It was Ralph Nader, Pat Buchanan, Froze people, Jim Hoffa was there, Sweeney, all of us. And what happened? Remember the guys, at first it was the Sea Turtles, and secondly was the guys throwing the cans through Starbucks, and the anarchists who basically turned the American people off to a movement I think the American people then would have supported. Stop exporting our jobs, stop sending the factories overseas, look out for our own people first.
It's interesting. That's why they're quite disciplined now in the Occupy Wall Street in terms of nonviolent civil disobedience. I mean, that Oakland conflict, for example,
Right.
where the Iraq War veteran got hit
Right.
by a canister.
Right.
Even that didn't provoke it. They're really
Right.
quite disciplined.
Right.
Whereas they're not being infiltrated the way they were in Seattle.
Right.
But you know, early in the Reagan administration, I was on a program with you
Right.
and local DC TV.
Right.
And my last words were, the coming months, Pat, will show whether you're a corporatist or a conservative. So let me ask you the question, just so people know
Right.
where you're coming
Right.
from. Are you a corporatist or a conservative?
I'm a conservative. I'm a traditionalist conservative, a Russell Kirk conservative. He was, when I was younger, I didn't, I followed the flashier conservatives in Russell Kirk, but eventually you came to see that really he had something really good to say about society and the good society and how to preserve it. So I'm much more that. I'm also, as a Catholic, I've got a little, Rerum Novarum Quadragesimo Anno, the social encyclicals, back in there, Ralph, from my...
Liberation theology?
No. No. Let me tell you a story, though, Ralph. I went to school, in journalism school, and one of my classmates was a Maryknoll priest. My brother was in the Maryknolls for a while. And a Maryknoll priest, and he and I became friends. His name was Miguel de Scoto. He became the foreign minister of the Sandinistas, and he won the Lenin Peace Prize. He's a classmate of mine, Catholic. So, no, but I did not agree with him back then, and I don't agree with him, obviously, now.
And how would you define a corporatist then?
I would say a corporatist, these fellows that are, a lot of the lobbyists here in Washington, D.C., some of them coming out of both administrations, both White Houses, they're down here in D.C., and they will do what the corporate boss tells them. Let me tell you a story again. I came out of the Nixon White House, and there was an issue, and you probably were involved in it. Toshiba, this Japanese company, had taken this super quiet technology we had for our submarines where they could move even into Soviet ports and move back out undetected, and they had access to it, and they turned it over to the Soviet Union. And I thought the Congress ought to come down on them with both feet. And I found out that guys I'd worked with in the Nixon White House were representing Toshiba up there.
Yeah.
And that's where that's the part in line for me.
Well, in the book, which I have read, the one thing that there is very little of was how in the mix of disintegration that you're describing is corporatism, is the power of corporations. Now, we know that corporations know few limits. Every major religion in the world warned its adherents not to give too much power to the mercantile class, the merchant class, the money lenders. And what we've seen in America, because you see a decline, I see a decline in this way. Parental authorities being sidestepped by corporations selling to kids junk food, violent programs, sadistic stuff.
Right.
Right.
I agree with you 100%.
Right. And so let me, because
Sure.
I'm trying to get the variables in here. The military-industrial complex doesn't mind our empire abroad. That's more business. Eisenhower warned us about that. The corporations pushed NAFTA and WTO through. We were both opposed to it.
Right.
That has dealt with a huge abandonment of jobs and industry to communist and fascist regimes overseas who know how to keep the workers in their place at 80 cents an hour. NAFTA dumped a lot of cheap corn into Mexico, dispossessed millions of families. Some of them in desperation went north over the border, increased the immigration there. You have the corruption of our democratic politics, but with the big money in politics. And they want to own everything, even our genes. They have thousands of patents of our genes. And they don't have any patriotism. I mean, these U.S. companies grew to profit on the backs of American workers. Got in trouble, they're bailed out by American taxpayers. Got in trouble overseas, American Marines, So what's their message to America? We're out of here with your jobs and industry to China. So why isn't and they've devastated the family. They have separated children from their parents. And we have a lot of documentation. How does this mix in the book? I mean, there isn't, except from one nice quote you have from a vice president of IBM on how industrial America is abandoning.
Well, okay. Well, let me just, I agree with almost everything you said. Look, they have no value. I mean, look, when you put pornography on the internet for children and all the rest of it, whether it's Hollywood or the businesses, you're right, they're corrupt human beings that do that. And I'm against that. And you and I were opposed NAFTA and GATT and these other things. But I will say that, you know, only in partial defense of business guys, when I traveled the country in 92 and 96,